To bring you guys round number 6, and we are going to cover an excellent match. We have Ant versus rayC, and I know this one means a lot to you, Brian, because we have rayC, a guy that means a lot to you because you said that he kind of grew up down your street.
Yeah, he actually, his mother was friends with my mother, actually after I had moved out and, was away at school. But, when he was a kid, he had, grown up playing games, and actually gave a bunch of my old competitive, card game stuff to him back when he was a youngster. And he's come a long way since then. And here he is, one game away from, or rather one match away from being in very good position moving into the rounds tomorrow.
That's right. Both these players are 4-1. Winning it would almost put them at the doorstep. They would just have to win one more after that to guarantee it. But even then, they still have a very good tiebreaker because the person they lose to is at least guaranteed a 5-2 record. Let's go into the first game here. We have Warrior versus the Mage. Now, it's a Pirate Warrior. And if you look at Ant, if you've seen him on stream earlier, actually, Brian and I got to cast him. He has a very fairly aggressive lineup. He has Murloc Paladin, Secret Mage, Pirate Warrior, Aggro Druid. On the other side, rayC has some similar classes, but very different archetypes. He's got Discover Mage, he's got Control Paladin, Jade Druid, Taunt Warrior. When you look at these lineups head-to-head, what really speaks out to you, Brian?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that Ray is going to probably have his best shot against this Pirate Warrior overall. And this is the deck that his overall lineup probably matches up the best against. Ant's lineup is actually very similar to the one that Hoy played just last week. The very aggressive mix of decks, even down to the specific Mage deck, the Secret Mage deck as well. So Ray here, he has a very good draw for this particular matchup. He has Frostbolt in his hand, and the Gluttonous Ooze as well is potentially going to give him both some value. And if he can get this, he just ooze this right now. This is an interesting spot because obviously Ant setting up just the weapon here means that he's not going to really have much that he can do if his weapon is just destroyed by the Gluttonous Ooze. There are a lot of valuable weapons in the deck that are more powerful than this, like the Arcanite Reapers, but putting Ant this far behind already in terms of the tempo of the game is more powerful than just getting a bigger swing from the individual weapon with the Reaper later. Yeah,
and that also shuts down a lot of Ant's ability to snowball that weapon, because, I mean, by all means, that weapon could have gotten much bigger with 2 Bloodsail cultists, as Ant looks like he's just going to fight for whatever board control he possibly can and get some pressure on. The interesting card, of course, is the Grimy Gadgeteer, which gives a random minion in your hand +2/+2. What do you think about that card? We've seen it a couple times now.
It's a pretty unusual choice for Pirate Warrior, but one thing that it does do is make it so that your draws when you get ahead snowball more. If you get down a Grimy Gadgeteer and it's not removed, it can really make your future threats extremely difficult for your opponent to deal with. And even if it is removed, you've gotten one activation of it, so you get a little bit ahead in tempo on a single minion, and that can be very difficult, especially for a damage-based removal deck like the one rayC is playing, to actually get rid of.
Yeah, and with so many choices at the 4-mana slot, or actually better yet, with so many mediocre choices at the 4-mana slot, now that you don't have so many options ever since the standard rotation came in for the Year of the Mammoth, it seems like Pirate Warriors are experimenting a lot. Ant has 1 Spellbreaker, 1 Naga Corsair, 1 Moto Strike, 1 Grimy Gadgeteer. If you aren't familiar with those cards, basically he's got a little bit of everything in case for any situation pops up.
Yeah, we've seen a lot of Spellbreakers just to get through taunts. One of the things that the Pirate Warrior decks can really struggle with is a big taunt like Primordial Drake, which you see everywhere, Jade Behemoth, which you see quite a bit, as well as even just Tar Creeper. Being able to get past that for lethal damage can be very powerful. But this can potentially be a very powerful swing for Ant as well, just getting down a gigantic cultist, which can happen to buff this Arcanite Reaper for some additional value.
Yeah, multiple times over. And that cultist is also a big threat in its own. It's a 5/6 minion. Now, Ray does have an opportunity to kind of answer the boards in the next couple of turns here. He had that Firelance Portal lined up originally. Now he's picking up a Frost Nova in case he needs to stall even longer. And of course, he has the ability to even flip the aggression with Alexstrasza or be defensive with it. So his hand still has a lot of opportunity to be aggressive or defensive. But it looks like it's going to be a little bit more defensive as Ant's going to go for the power swing turn that he was looking for. So yes, his opponent had 30 health at turn 5, which is very unusual, but I mean, this is still looking pretty scary.
Yeah, one of the really key things is that rayC has access to Alexstrasza in his hand, and he's managed to really defend himself pretty well in the early turns. He's not on the back foot at this point. Ant has only gotten in 10 damage so far. He does have that pretty threatening cultist in play, but Ray has that Alexstrasza with Ice Block up, so if he's able to sort of weather the storm in the intermediate turns, it's going to be difficult for Ant to pop his block before he can be in position to get his life back up with Alexstrasza.
That's right, and then Ant's, of course, introduced with a difficult decision at this point where should he bother cleaning up the minions, or should he try to get this weapon damage into his opponent? Because his opponent's at 20, and he could swing with 14 over 2 turns. That would set up an opportunity where maybe he can pop the ice block with some really powerful spells, either Mortal Strike or Leroy Jenkins for 6 damage. So we'll end up seeing what happens here. Is Ant looks like he's just going to at least play these pirates, but what's he going to do after that? What's he going to swing?
It's definitely tough because if he's trying to play around Alexstrasza, then he wants to ensure that he is able to remove minions on the board and get in repeated damage. And he's going into 7-mana turn. This could be Firelens Portal, though we already saw a Firelens Portal from Ray. Getting the minion killed is very likely to represent at least 3 damage because it's the smallest of his minions that he can actually remove. So, and can potentially add up to more than that. So Ant is going to go ahead and try to lengthen the lifespan of these minions, but Ray has a polymorph for the large health one, and he's going to take down everything but that cultist. But this does still protect the cultist. So by attacking into the nesting rock the previous turn, he's at least opened up that 3 damage next turn.
Yeah, you know, with that volcanic potion, I wonder if rayC had an opportunity to clear. I think he would have been a little bit off in mana because the Sorcerer's Apprentice, the way it works, is like unable to actually get the discount while being able to attack into it, so he couldn't really get a full clear. But now Ant's able to get a little bit of damage, and that might be the difference maker, because we were looking at how he's going to make up that 6 difference in health total. And now he's going to put his opponent down to 9.
Yeah,
might be able to get there.
The South Sea Captain is actually quite crucial here because it does effectively heal 1 on the Blood Cell Cultist, which means the ping that rayC used last turn is not in a position that it actually is going to enable him to kill this with Volcanic Potion, which was his plan. Picking up the Firelens Portal is pretty good because he could potentially use it to remove the largest of these minions, giving him a body in play which can potentially threaten to attack into a minion that Ant has. And if Ant doesn't break block this turn, you know, it's very difficult for him to get past the Alexstrasza with the block up on the following turn as well.
Whew. So close to popping the ice block. Now, of course, we know rayC had the Alexstrasza, but Ant, of course, is not playing with that information in his hand. He's just trying to focus on what he needs to do here, and he can't really do it. He can set his opponent down to 1, though.
Yeah, Ant really needs to play like Alexstrasza doesn't exist. He's not in a position where he can beat the card, so he just wants to push damage. He just wants to try and ensure, okay, well, if I'm able to break your block next turn and you don't have the Alexstrasza, then maybe I'm able to win the game. But the Alexstrasza is extremely difficult for him to have an opportunity to actually beat this turn. Yeah, Ray's just going to fire it off immediately. Decides that he wants to leave the block up rather than let it get popped and then Alexstrasza after the fact. It also just puts an 8/8 on the board, which can threaten to remove any of these minions that Ant can play to potentially threaten him.
Or even leverage it to push damage and kill his opponent for 2 turns if he picks up Flame Strike or other really powerful removal of some kind. And look at Ant, he has to play, you know, a little bit slower here. Can't just rush past his opponent. Starting to remove that Ethereal Peddler, which got some really good work in off that Firelens Portal. rayC looking for game-ending damage in the next couple turns here. Pyroblast can contribute to that, but for now, because rayC doesn't have a guaranteed 2-turn setup, it's probably best. Well, actually, hold on here. Let's think about his options at this point, Kibler.
He does have some options here because right now, you know, let's say he were to just push face with the Alexstrasza. He can look for damage here with, he's going to go ahead and look with Cabal Courier, find if there's anything that potentially will give him the ability to set up with the Pyroblast. Finds the Possessed Villager, and now he's just going to play control, looks like.
That was interesting. And I was like, oh, well, Temple Enforcer, you know, adds a 6/6 and plus health to your Alexstrasza, but I think rayC is more just in removal mode, saying, like, I think at this point, any kind of board pressure that I put onto my opponent is going to be significant. And Ant picks up one of the best cards for damage, but now he's just going to be worried about dying on the opposite end of things. He can't really be too concerned, though, because he has to keep pushing. His opponent still has at least 2 turns.
Yeah, and Ant's gonna get the bad news that, you know, there is gonna be the damage to follow this up. It's not quite enough to actually end the game this turn.
with Power
Oh, no, he
Blast,
is, yeah.
sure.
For some reason, I counted that. I discounted that. I was like, oh, wait, no, he doesn't have it. But there it is. Pyro Blast is definitely enough.
Yep, very important win for rayC that the Pirate Warrior didn't escape it. I think, and I completely agree with you, Brian. I think Pirate Warrior is the, quote, weak link of Ant's lineup. However, it's not like rayC has, guaranteed matchups. You look at Control Paladin versus Pirate Warrior, and that could also be a little bit risky. And we've heard some criticisms from, most vocally Firebat, saying he's not a big fan of Control Paladin for tournaments. It's been underperforming, and he feels like that deck, even the decks that it's supposed to beat, isn't beating it solidly. And you need some of these matchups to really fall your way in order to have a commanding ability to target a specific deck.
One of the issues that Control Paladin often has is that so many of its cards are reactive that sometimes it just will have the wrong kinds of reactive cards and things just won't really line up properly. And because it doesn't really have that many tools to proactively end the game, your opponent just has a lot of time. When we saw a matchup last weekend where Stan Sifka was playing against an aggro druid deck, and he was in a hugely advantaged position, but he just drew Forbidden Healing after Forbidden Healing while his opponent connected a Vicious Fledgling. And it was like, okay, well, Flappy Bird is here to stay, and it can outrace your healing. So definitely a deck that has a lot of ways that things can fall apart.
Absolutely. And, rayC is definitely feeling pretty confident against J-Druid. Surprisingly, J-Druid these days, very strong against some of the early game aggro setups that Pirate Warrior has. And it looks like that's exactly what we're going to for game number 2. And seems to be taking the opposite approach. Some people say, I want to keep my weakest deck last year. But he says, I just need as many chances for Pirate Warrior to get a win. Because remember, rayC is trying to get that victory. Now, the edge that J-Druid has over Pirate Warrior, it doesn't feel that big though, right? People are saying like maybe slightly favored, like 55, maybe 53%. Does rayC have any other special tech to really beat it?
Well, he does have an additional taunt compared to many versions. He has a Ancient of War. He does not have the Tar Creeper or the Galaka Crawler, or he does have a Gluttonous Ooze, yes. But he doesn't have the Tar Creeper or Galaka Crawler that some of the other versions have to more specifically target the Pirate Warriors.
Yeah, like Frozen, right? Double Galaka
Double Galaka Crawler. He really wanted to beat Pirate Warrior.
rayC was more of a soft counter, and of course, Gluttonous Ooze also helps him against some of the other matchups that are very weapon-intensive, like Paladin, especially if they get getaway Kodos or other crazy shenanigans off of Hydrologists and Stonehill Defenders. And of course, he'd pass on his turn 1. Now, when you pass on turn 1, you are a little bit scared because you're afraid of like a big explosion of pirates. That's something that Amnesiac actually has done very well by being conservative resources and kind of saying, well, you can't remove all this at the same time. But at the same time, you can see the draw's a little bit awkward for him, and you can't exactly go for all aggression right now.
I think what he's going for is actually pretty aggressive. He's going to go ahead and point out the upgrade, which allows him to play the Dread Corsair, and now he has a patches that's protected by the taunt.
I see.
Now Ray's hero power can no longer just remove the patches, and he has a 4-attack weapon. So this is able to connect for quite a bit of damage. And now Ray finds an Auctioneer, which is about the worst card in the deck in the matchup.
Yeah, definitely. You don't want Auctioneer. It's got no taunt abilities, no way to impact the board directly, and it's very expensive. And Ant's now going to add the pain. He's going to have Frothing Berserker out as a 4/4 at least. And rayC does not have any direct removal, but he's got some big taunts.
Problem is he has really big taunts. He has 2 8-cost taunts, and he has 1 Innervate. He can't actually play anything this turn without using Innervate. And then if he does Innervate this turn, the 2 Primordial Drakes are just going to be sitting in his hand until he actually gets up to 8 mana, which is very far away. He could use the Wrath as removal for the Dread Corsair, but that's going to leave a 5-attack Frothing Berserker on the board along with that big weapon. And that's going to be very difficult to actually stabilize against, to say nothing of the Spellbreaker that's waiting in Ant's hand. This is looking very bad for Ray.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of what Ant does to fight back against some of these decks that are biased against the Pirate Warriors, right? So that way he can get past taunts. And that's why he has a couple of other interesting choices there, like the Grimy Gadgeteer.
Yeah, it's just going to be removal for Ray. And
that is going to be quite the Frothing Berserker to deal with for the next couple turns here, because he still doesn't have a way to deal with it next turn.
Yeah, it's looking very bad.
All right, well, Ant doesn't actually have the ideal.
Oh, well, there's a card. He does have the ideal card.
I would say he doesn't have the ideal 4-mana minion to add to the pressure, but he does.
Just kidding, there it is.
Yeah, and that's 13 by my count for this turn. Looks like he's going to swing with everything, well aware of the Gluttonous Ooze in rayC's deck. how does rayC deal with it now? I mean, was he saving it for the Primordial Drake? If he Primordial Drakes, he's just dead. Spellbreaker going to be able to get past that 8 health of blockage. And Ant's going to tie up the series 1-1 and very crucially gets a big win because Pirate Warrior was going to be the deck that rayC was soft targeting.
With the controlling lineup he has, lots of early removal, generally pretty strong in that matchup. But as you mentioned, the Jade Druid deck can sometimes struggle in that matchup because it does have pretty inconsistent draws that can potentially get. He didn't have the Wild Growth turn 2. He didn't have the early ramp outside of the Jade Blossom, and that's not quite enough to get you ahead to actually protect yourself against the Pirate Warrior.
It's true, and you know, that big explosive turn with turn 2 upgrading the weapon, getting 12 damage with the Fiery War Axe plus the upgrade, and then having the Drake Corsair stick for a couple turns there, it was just a huge swing that Druid can't deal with everything at the same time without that Gluttonous Ooze.
Right.
And you can see that rayC really needed something to stabilize and just couldn't get his footing. If he was given, I think, an extra turn, or maybe like for the Pirate Warrior to let him set up, maybe he'd be able to get there because he had 3 waves of taunts, and that's really hard for the Pirate Warrior to get through after a certain point.
Yeah, I do think that if he'd had the Wild Growth on 2 and just be able to innervate out the Jade Behemoth immediately on his 3rd turn, suddenly you're stopping so much damage that's coming in against you. He did still have kind of an awkward draw after that, though, because he had both of his 8-drop taunts in his hand. So he could have still struggled in those middle turns just with too many expensive cards to really get going.
Yeah, well, not to be too afraid if you're a rayC fan. There's still a couple of interesting question marks. One of them, of course, is Secret Mage. That is a deck that you pointed out. It seems like he's adopted a very similar strategy to Hoy, the winner of the Europe Spring Playoffs. He does have a couple differences. I believe if you look at his deck list, he doesn't have the Antonidas package with Mana Bind and Mirror Images. That would seem to be more of Hoy's specific tech, and Ant seems to be bringing something different. He's got a very good old friend of yours, Mr. Yogg-Saron himself.
Oh yes, I'm a big Yogg fan. We saw Yogg quite a bit last year, not quite as much after the change to make it stop casting when it dies, and definitely makes it far less of a powerful value card, which is why you usually tend to see it only really in decks that are using it essentially as a reset button. They're trying to play Yogg to potentially come back in a board that they're otherwise insurmountably behind. The Secret Mage just feels like kind of a weird place for it because you're generally planning to try to be leveraging your mana advantage from Cabal Crystal Runner and your free secrets off of your Kirintor mages. But it is a, well, I can't do anything. Here's maybe how I can win.
Well, this is a very fortunate scenario here for rayC. He got the only matchup I think Control Paladin is favored against Ant's lineup specifically. He's got Secret Mage, because Secret Mage, while it does end up being able to get to the board, Control Paladin can stabilize a lot of times against it, although Ant has a pretty good opening hand.
He does, yes, with the Mana Worm, Babbling Book, and Arcanologist. One crucial thing, though, in this matchup, the mirror entities in Ant's deck. In many mid-range matchups, they're extremely powerful. Against a deck with Doomsayer, they can sometimes just be an absolute liability.
Yes.
Though Ray is not going to try to mess around with mirror images at all and just stop this Mana Worm in its tracks before it does too much damage.
Yeah, one of the things as Pyros comes in the hand, that's another one card I want to talk about really soon. But one of the things that's really important about Secret Mage, it's very much like Tempo Mage of yore. If you guys remember before standard rotation with Flame Wakers, Mana Worms, that's how you used to push out a bunch of damage with Azure Drake and Arcane Blasts, Arcane Missiles. That deck is really great at doing a lot of big damage, but it needs minion damage in order to finish the game. Secret Mage is still very similar to that. It can't actually just end the game with burn alone a lot of the times unless they have Antonidas. So stopping any kind of minion damage is really useful, even if you feel like it's a little bit of a waste to just use a Doomsayer against a Mana Worm.
Yeah, speaking of some people may consider a waste, Ray just playing his Tempo Wild Pyromancer here, and he's doing this because he knows that Ant is likely to play a potential Arcanologist this turn, or perhaps a Pyros. He wants to just be able to trade into it with his board and not really risk the threat of damage coming his way. Yep. He doesn't want to wait and try and combo this with an equality. This isn't a matchup that's about building a big board and maybe wiping it all off in one go. It's much more about tempo, much more about fighting for the early turns. So Ray doesn't want to risk just using his hero power and falling behind more powerful minions.
Ooh, Pyros hits the board. One of my favorite cards from the expansion, too. I love a lot of Mage from the set of Umgoro. I love the Quest, I love Meteor, and I love Pyros, just in terms of the design and the flavor. What do you think about Pyros in this kind of deck, Secret Mage? It's very unexpected. I thought it goes in Elemental Mage.
We have seen Pyros. I've actually played Pyros quite a bit myself in a lot of my Mage decks, simply because a lot of times, even as a control deck, you want to have an early play that could potentially trade with your opponent's early minions, and Pyros can do that while still offering value in the middle turns of the game. That's one thing that it does in this deck, is basically just offers you a minion that can provide you with mid-game value as well as being an early game tempo play. In many cases, you just want more things you can do early on, because if you don't have that Mana Worm, you don't have that Arcanologist, a lot of times you're just going to fall too far behind.
Right. And we also already talked about the emphasis of importance of having some kind of tempo and some kind of minion damage to generate. And Pyros as a 6/6 isn't a joke. I mean, and sometimes I've seen it connected for 10 damage, and it wins you the game because of it, because they can't deal with it. They use all the removal.
Well, speaking of removal, Ray uses his True Silver Champion to take down the Arcanologist, and is able to set up a actually pretty strong board here.
Yeah.
The Tempo Dread Corsair off of the attack of the True Silver Champion is actually leaving him in a position where he's the one pushing damage, and that's really something you don't tend to see in this matchup. It's usually the Secret Mage that is ahead in the early game, so this is a very strong position for Ray at this point.
Yeah, particularly because of that card he just picked up, Spike Ridge Steed. Part of the reason why that card is so powerful is if you get onto the board, you're really not going to fall. You're not really going to let go of it easily. And Ray is the reason why he's pushing so much is because he wants a minion to stick. So that way increases the chances for Spike Ridge Steed to land. So the closer we get to that point, the likelihood is that Ant can't get minion damage in, and he's sitting at 28 health. Cards like Mana Worm have lost so much of its luster at this point of the game.
And it'll be interesting to see how Ant navigates this next turn, because he knows that Spike Ridge Steed is a huge threat. And there's the possibility that he actually is going to go ahead and use the Freezing Potion to stop the True Silver here, to protect his board, and potentially force Ray to just trade her.
Oh, mama.
That is such a big draw from Ray. The Stampeding Kodo lets him just clear off the board, and now he is the only one with a minion in play. And now Ant needs to decide, okay, can I afford to play the 6-cost Pyros? And can I beat Spike Ridge Steed if it comes down? He could play, say, Mirror Entity Counterspell this turn to try and set up. And yeah, he recognizes just how powerful Spike Ridge Steed this turn would be, and just goes ahead and plays both of his secrets. These are the only secrets in his deck. So Ray knows that this is exactly a Mirror Entity and a Counterspell. So he's going to try and navigate exactly how he can best play against those exact cards.
Well, he's going to toss in Consecration immediately, because he knows that a lot of the smaller minions have been eliminated. And he has to be worried about Pyros as kind of the bigger minion threat. Of course, one big spell coming up this turn is also Firelands Portal. And as the game progresses, you're going to see really powerful tempo swings on both sides. Paladin has access, of course, to big board clear, single target removal, big buffs through Spike Ridge Steed. But Ant's got cheap Cabal Crystal Runners, of course, as time goes on, too, with things like the Mediz Valet. So it's going to be a tight tug of war back and forth. Red Mana Worm is a powerful card, but it's
pretty good, but it's Spike Ridge Steed time. Now, the 1/1 was able to live, and it is now a 3/7 right in that Stegodon, takes out the Mana Worm, and now this is going to be very difficult for Ant to really push damage through, because he has to get through both the original buff body, as well as the 2/6 taunt that comes off the back end. There's a Primordial Glyph, though. If Ant's able to find a Polymorph effect, that can negate the death rattle of the Spike Ridge Steed and potentially allow him to get by it more easily.
I believe it's only Polymorph these days, right? Because Polymorph Boar was rotated out with the Grand Tournament.
Is Boar? I thought Boar was in a different. No, I've been Boar recently, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm misremembering.
All right. Well, either way, there's not many options, and Ant says instead of just getting a spell, I'm probably just going to load up the board with as much power, and that's pretty good. 8 mana, you load up 11 of stats. Distribute, of course.
And it's very important to remember that Ant still has that secret. He still has the mirror entity, which Ray knows about.
Right.
Now Ray, rather than playing an individual powerful minion like Ragnar's Lightlord or his Primordial Drake, is going to go ahead and play the Aldor Peacekeeper to trigger that secret. And Ray's hand is actually pretty awkward. So if Ant were able to find a additional copy of Mirror Entity, Ray would have some trouble actually playing into it with his extremely heavy hand.
I really like this use of Forbidden Healing on a minion. It's very clear that your opponent's not gonna burn you down directly by using spells to your health pool. So just try to secure more of that board. It's very clear that he doesn't have an ability to deal with this Spike Ridge Steed minion yet.
There's a polymorph though. That is a very, very strong pickup for Ant. Cabalist's Tome and Arcane Intellect are also fairly attractive, but I have to imagine, given the fact that he is facing that Spike Ridge Steed, that polymorph is just kind of jumping off the page at him.
I mean, even if you don't use the polymorph, there's also a lot of other targets you could use it on too.
It's true. It is true.
There's Tyrion, of course, and Ragnaros, Lightlord, Primordial Drakes. Maybe Amp's feeling like he needs more value.
I was going to say, I think that he may be looking at the situation, and he's behind on this board, and he doesn't have that many cards in his hand. Ray's at 28 and is getting into the late game, and I think, yeah, he may be just thinking, okay, I need to have even more than just this polymorph to punch through.
Okay, generates another mirror entity. And that's going to be a secret that Ray knows is not going to be in the deck, so it's going to be a little trickier to play around, even though we know it's mirror entity. All right, well, sets up. Looks like a really nice, clean Primordial Drake coming down here.
Well, it's also an opportunity to potentially just play Ragnaros or Curator. Yeah, he's going to go ahead and try and generate more value. This does give him, even more potential big threats in hand. The fact that he just kind of snap played that Hydrologist actually it kind of gives me pause, because his hand is just all expensive. Oh, actually, no, he picked up the Wild Pyromancer. Never mind. So the Wild Pyromancer gives him a smaller minion that if Ant does play a secret, he can potentially lead with.
Right.
And then play, say, his Ragnaros into the possible mirror entity, because he can actually bait it with the Pyromancer. And there's actually another mirror entity after picking up the one off Babbling Book.
Yeah, that's not what you want to see if you're Ant.
And he finds. All right. Well.
Jeez.
He does have mirror entity plus a Medivh's Valet to potentially use for some removal, as well as now 2 Flame Geysers, which are okay, but not really the kind of power he was looking for when he picked that Cabalist's Tome off of the Primordial Glyph.
Excuse me, you are on.
Well, Ant's just gonna take it a little bit slow, not really rush too much. He still has that Pyros coming back as a 10/10, so he's got actually mana to spend. That's one thing that you're concerned about long term, is being able to spend your mana. And Ray's gonna test for Mirror Entity first, sees that it is, and confirms that this is the second Mirror Entity from the deck.
Yeah, and this next one could be tricky, because the fact that there is an additional randomly generated Mirror Entity in Ant's hand could potentially bait rayC into playing a large minion into it.
Especially if he plays, Kodo right now.
Yeah, the rest of his hand is 8 drops.
Yeah. Looks like the Primordial Drake is what he's leaning towards. Stampeding Kodo is also not necessarily the worst option too, because it allows you to develop the secret behind it as well.
He can also just play Spike Ridge Steed. Yeah, it looks like he's going to go ahead and do the secret plus the Spike Ridge Steed, which will clear off the Wild Pyromancer he'd given to Ant, and allow him to take some strong. He's actually debating whether he wants trades here. No, going face. And I like this, because attacking into one of these minions just kind of sets Ant up to just play the big Pyros anyway. So you might as well get the damage in before the additional big minion comes down.
Is it really that big of a deal if Primordial Drake copies on the other side? Because it's like 4/8 taunt meets a 4/8 taunt, and it seems like you're still relatively safe.
It's not necessarily that bad, given the fact that you are in a pretty secure position as far as your health total, but you'd obviously rather give your opponent a smaller minion if you could afford to.
And it looks like the Pyros comes back into the hand as a 10/10 beast, resurrected once again.
I love the sound and animation of the different levels of Pyros. It's just super cool. That's one of the cards that I crafted in gold specifically because it's such a high value gold card, because you get 3 different gold cards out of the 1 gold card.
That's right. A lot of a lot of value for you wallet mages, I guess.
Exactly.
Oh man. Repentance just reducing the cost, or reducing the health, excuse me, of this Kirin Tor Mage to trivial amounts. I mean, rayC could kill it either way. But now rayC has to think about that other secret first. Kind of calculate what he wants to do. First test for Vaporize and Ice Barrier, sees that it's not. I guess he's just going to go for the Drake immediately because it's a very appetizing play. Sees that it's Mirror Entity, but again, not the end of the world here.
Yeah, and it's particularly not a problem given the fact that he just picked up Sunkeeper Terra. No matter how big Ant's minions are, Ray has the tools to turn them into 3/3s and potentially just punch through with his other minions.
Yeah, I guess all of a sudden, Ant's converted to an Elemental Mage. He's got 2 Flame Geysers, he's got Pyros. Shatter's pretty useless for now. I think Ant only has one other freeze effect, and that's the second Frostbolt. At this point, Ant is so far behind, he's probably going to look for card draw sources into a Yogg-Saron to try to commandingly swing back the board.
Yeah, Yogg is really probably the lone card in Ant's deck that's particularly impressive at this point, because Ray just has so much value in his hand. He has a massive health lead, and he is the one who generally has more powerful late game cards in his deck. He still has Tyrion in his deck. He still has not that much in terms of other late game. He's actually drawn most of it, but even just the Ragnaros in his hand is obviously a huge threat as well.
Yeah, I mean, Stonehill Defender could also get another big one, and Tarim, of course, gives him some big push. Pyros comes down, but there's a Stone Keeper Tarim that's just gonna neuter that completely.
Or Quality, whichever one you want.
Quality, or both. Who knows? Stonekeeper Tarim comes down first. Grime Street Protector, Saga the Slither, all really good options at their big late game taunts. And Ant, without Yogg-Saron, is staring at his last turn here because he's got some useless cards in his hand.
It is not time to bow down. It is time to bow out.
And that's another big win here for rayC. Now, granted, this was, again, the only matchup where I think Control Paladin had a pretty decisive advantage in. Everything else is either very 50-50 close or unfavored. Of course, the Murloc Paladin is something that he banned, so he was really afraid of that. And Aggro Druid is a little bit dicey, as we saw in previous series on this broadcast. So definitely, rayC is feeling really good, and Ant has to go back to the drawing board. rayC only has one deck remaining, and that is the Jade Druid that he lost in Game 2 with.
Yeah, and the Jade Druid is pretty strong in this matchup overall. It can kind of struggle if there are good mirror entity opportunities against a Secret Mage deck, and sometimes it just gets run over by the very good draws from the Aggro Druid, though. But it is a very, very powerful deck capable of extremely explosive draws, even in its bad matchups.
Absolutely, and I'm sure Ant probably still feels okay with that. The question is, what is Jade Druid really weak against, too? And Jade Druid does have the ability to also just win because it's Druid, too. We talk about Aggro Druid and the ability to get out, Bittertide Hydra, or like a really fast Vicious Fledgling, or crazy Power of the Wild boards. But Jade Druid can also do really crazy and, quite frankly, obnoxious things, too. It just, innervates out like a Jade Behemoth and hits, like, really powerful Jade curves. And then by turn 5, you're hitting a 5/5 Jade every time you summon something.
Yeah, I had someone play a turn 3 Primordial Drake against me the other day.
Did he?
It did. And
Coin, innervate.
It was, yeah. But it was against my Dragon Priest deck, and it didn't work out terribly well for him because you just invested all of your resources in this one thing.
I mean, it is a 4-attack minion. Thought like, 4-attack minion, high health, I'm good.
But against these aggressive decks, a very early Primordial Drake, especially against Druid, can be absolutely devastating. So I think that's what Ray's gonna be looking for in that matchup. But the Secret Mage matchup is also potentially very interesting. And that's actually what we're gonna see here.
That's right. So one player who wins this game, if rayC can close out here, he goes to 5-1, finishes out the first day of the America Spring Playoffs in prime position to go to the top 8 playoff single elimination. If Ant is able to tie the series, he is going to be able to have a good chance to do the same thing. Or if he drops to 4-2, going to be relying on tiebreakers, which you never want.
Yeah, Ray has the absolutely crucial Wild Growth in his opening hand. We saw that he kept that as his one card off the mulligan. Ooh, another Wild Growth, not quite as attractive, but can help him ramp up to big minions very quickly, and the Jade Idol as well. So pretty strong hand from rayC. Ant, though, also a very strong hand. Turn 1 Mana Worm into a variety of options in future turns as well. No secrets just yet to actually power out with those Kirin Mages, though.
Yeah, definitely going to be looking for any kind of secret to play with that Kirin next turn to buff that Mana Worm to a 3/3. And of course, play his own 4/3. And that could already just be the beginning of the end of the game. Second Mana Worm comes into hand. That's not necessarily the worst draw either here, because Ant has set up for very powerful turn 3s. If he has opportunities for Mana Worm to push for damage, he can play Arcane Intellect, or he can just play Kirin Mage if he draws a secret.
Yeah, one thing that's just generally been true about Druid for its lifespan in Hearthstone is that the ramp-style Druid decks can be pretty difficult to play against aggressive openings that include multiple relatively high-health minions. And this is actually what Ant has. Ant has now a ton of power in play, and Ray has only one removal spell that can hit a single one of these minions. Yes, he has the Wild Growth. Yes, he can potentially ramp up, but he's still 2 turns away from actually playing the Ancient of War.
Where's your Volcanic Potion when you need one? It wouldn't even clear the board, just because this Mana Worm number 2 would survive. Really annoying position for rayC. And picks up Frostbolt, so he can start packing in the damage in the next couple turns here, as he just plays one Kieran Tor just to set up some pressure. rayC has ramped up twice over.
Nourish is obviously a powerful draw, but doesn't do anything to actually address the threats on the board. This is one of the places where Druid really misses Living Roots, which he could potentially draw into with Nourish to actually kill a minion for just 1 mana. He's even just thinking about tempoing out the Auctioneer. This is looking to just absorb damage to either his face or potentially get one of these minions to trade in.
Man, if that was Mirror Entity, that would have been really bad news for rayC. And trying to optimize how much damage he can squeeze in this turn.
Yeah, this Auctioneer may seem kind of like a crazy play, but it does allow Ray to mitigate some of the development for mana. He ended up using his mana to remove it. He didn't trade off any of his board, but that meant that he wasn't developing more. He didn't actually play Kieran Tor Mage into a secret there, and now this is actually an opportunity for Ray to get this taunt down. He's only at 15 health, but 10 health on the Ancient of War is quite a lot.
Yeah, effectively gave the guys an Auctioneer taunt, and when it's otherwise a useless card in a lot of aggro matchups.
Fireball is a very good draw for Ant, though.
Yikes!
Yeah, with the discount from the Sorcerer's Apprentice, he's able to take down the 10 health and still connect for potentially just 8 damage here, putting Ray down to just 7.
And that's going to set up lethal for next turn, even if these minions die, because he's got Fireland's Portal as a way to set it up. Looks like he's keeping the Kieran Tor alive.
Yeah, so he decided to keep the Kieran Tor alive because he's going into turn 8, where Ray would have access to Primordial Drake.
I like it. I like it. Being very careful to play around the cards that he expects on turn 8, but Ray's got nothing.
There's Feral Rage, which can keep him alive. He'll gain 8 life here, so he goes up to effective 16. There's 7 on the other side. There's still, the Fireland's Portal here is huge, or Mirror Entity may even be more powerful. Ant can actually set up Kieran Tor into both secrets, which means that any big minion or removal spell is going to be very difficult for Ray to rely on. There's really 2 major options here. It's Fireland's Portal or play Kieran Tor into both secrets. The Fireland's Portal would deal 5 to Ray and put a big minion into play. That would potentially make it so that he doesn't have the ability to get value off of the counterspell or Mirror Entity. So that's kind of why I like the play of Kieran Tor into both secrets, because a big taunt will give you a big taunt, and you stop your opponent from being able to potentially have a swipe that helps clear off a lot of your board.
Yeah, and the big reason why is because you convert things like the Kieran Tor and the secrets into damage.
Right.
Versus the Firelight Portal will always do damage.
Exactly.
Depending on if you just target to your opponent's face. So I kind of like that because it's a difference maker. And rayC sees both secrets come out here. Kind of knows that he's in quite the pickle. Jade Blossom's not going to do anything. He can Jade Idol to get the counterspell. You can Jade Behemoth to get a taunt and Earthen Scales it. Is that going to keep him alive? He goes up to, what, 13, but he gives him a bonus of 3/6.
He ends up having 7 health here, which can, or 7 health taunt rather. The Firelands, there's no, I guess there's 9 that can actually, 9, 10, 11, 12. I believe Ant is 1 off lethal this turn because he can potentially trade in 7 damage into the taunt and then push another 12 to face.
Okay. So maybe just take it a little slow again and you portal. Oh, and maybe he's worried about the follow-up if he overextends onto the board. But his opponent his board is still pretty good against a Primordial Drake.
It's true. Yeah, his board is mostly minions that would survive a Primordial Drake, and he has the ability to potentially just play counterspell. He can even, does this actually get a mirror too? Yes.
Oh, it does.
Yeah, he can actually play double secret this turn, and just, like you said, take it slow. There's no real rush to get this Fireland's Portal out. It's always going to do those 5 damage, and now he's just kind of putting Ray in the squeeze where there's no good options for him on his next turn.
Unless he's able to get a Primordial Drake. He's gonna Jade Blossom. Does a swipe help at this point?
Not really. He can't really attack anything in his face. Just Burn is going to kill him at this point.
That's right. So he's gonna stay alive by his measurements. But we know that Fireland's Portal is just gonna end the game here. And rayC fought valiantly. I kind of thought he never even had a chance to stabilize. If his opponent didn't have any damage, he may have been able to do it, but Ant just had a little too much here, and Fireland's Portal is going to be able to end the game here, guaranteed.
Yep. And this is, as you mentioned, this is a matchup that can be super volatile. The Jade Druid is capable of really getting out and if it has time to get going. But the Secret Mage, especially with that Mana Worm start, the Mana Worm into Mana Worm coin Sorcerer's Apprentice, just so much pressure from Ant early on. Yep. Never allowed Ray to get going, and then the pincher move of the different secrets at once really made any of his plays just not really work out.
Yeah, and this is one of the things we were also talking at the very beginning of the series. Ant felt pretty comfortable against Jade Druid outside of Pirate Warrior matchup. And so this last matchup, the Aggro Druid versus Jade Druid, can also be very similar to what you just watched, where it's just, maybe it's not the Mana Worms, but it's now it's all of a sudden, the little Flame Elementals getting +1/+1, and it's a little bit hard to keep track of all that little damage. And then they hit something with Savage Roar, or they have a big Living Man turn, or they have a Vicious Fledgling that sticks onto the board. There's so many things that you must remove from this deck.
Yeah. Historically, aggressive decks are really what people brought to beat Jade Druid. Jade Druid is kind of the menace against control. We've seen a lot of the Jade Druid decks, specifically with the tech cards they choose, like Gluttonous Ooze, tend to kind of claw back some of that percentage as Pirate Warrior, but they're still really vulnerable to explosive starts from other aggressive decks.
Yeah, that's right. Gluttonous Ooze is going to be stranded in Ray's hand for this matchup. He's not going to want that at all. He's going to be looking for Innervates. He's going to be looking for some of the wild growths. He's going to be looking for an opportunity to get to the board early. So
Turn 3 Primordial Drake.
Turn 3 Primordial Drake could be one of the keys. But there's a higher likelihood that Ant hits something powerful turn 3.
It is, yeah.
Than rayC. So we're going to come down to this game number 5. It's been fast, it's been furious. And the winner of this will go 5-1 and end their first day of spring playoffs in prime position to make top 8.
Yeah, and Ray's hand here, not particularly explosive. He's actually going to mulligan all of it. Even though he had the Jade Idol, which is often a strong early play in a lot of matchups, here you really, really need the mana acceleration. And he finds it, though.
Wow.
He actually has the ability, if he wants to just play a turn 1 Fandral.
Yeah, into Wild Growth, so he's not stranding the Fandral. A lot of times what you're worried about is
and Ant has a very awkward draw. Ant has his Tar Creepers, which he intends for matchups against other aggressive decks, but in this matchup, they're 1-power attackers.
That's right. rayC going to do everything he can to make sure that he has a way to answer any kind of Innervate Fledgling if his opponent had picked it up. And this is something, too, that happens once in a while with the Token Druid, is that a lot of times you can just run into awkward hands. Look at this. The only thing you can use Marker Yasharaj on is his opponent's Fandral. This is terrible for Ant.
Just look at his expression from Ant. Just kind of blows off some steam there. As clearly, this is not what he wanted to see in this position.
Oh,
one game away from a very, very likely berth into the top 8 of this tournament, and rayC is the one on the board and attacking, and that's not what you want in this matchup.
Yeah, Aggro Druid giveth and taketh away at this point. It's very clear what Malfurion prefers at this point of the series. All right, well, maybe he can climb back with Living Mana. That's a card that you can't ever really sleep on, and without cards like Starfall ever being really played by Druid, it's still a hard card to remove. We'll see if maybe he's able to climb back here.
Yeah, I mean, there is the opportunity to potentially double buff up this Tar Creeper. He can use that to take out the Fandral. And yeah, that does prevent Ray from getting the Fandral activated double choice Nourish on the next turn, which would absolutely be backbreaking.
That's right, and then also it protects his some of his other stuff, like his Mana Crystals or his Vicious Fledgling, so that could be problematic as well.
This is a little bit awkward for Ray because he picked up a Jade Idol. He had just, because of the Fandral ended up shoveling one in, but he picks up another one, so now actually he gets to play a 1-cost 3/3 and a 1-cost 4/4.
Yeah, not bad. Not bad at all. I think at this point, all you want as rayC is just to stop your opponent from getting a lot onto the board here.
Oh,
Living Mana with Innervate Power of the Wild. Are you kidding me? Ant's making the comeback.
Yeah, Ant was initially stumbling here, but all the right pieces come together. And now it's Ray's turn to roll his eyes at an enormous swing from Ant here.
Hey, we said don't sleep on this Aggro Druid swipe being picked up, but it couldn't be more useless here, Brian, as rayC is looking like he is under dire straits.
Yeah, swipe can allow him to help punch through the Tar Creeper somewhat, but Ray recognizes that that's not going to be enough. He's going to potentially, he's actually going to face tank this.
Ouch.
And just get as much on the board as he can. This is 8 damage here.
Wait, no, is he just dead? There's 15 on the board, and there's 1 damage from
16.
Oh, he can't
use the hero power.
Oh man, talk about living at the edge. Because the only card that would have killed him was either another Innervate or Mark of the Lotus or Patches being drawn.
Yeah.
The one time you probably want to be okay with drawing Patches.
Ray down to just 1 life, and he's really in rough straits clearing this board. I don't know what can really do it. He has swipe. Swipe can let him clear off 2 of these along with his Jade Spirit. The other 2 minions can take out 2 more, but there will still be 1 of these mana treants left alive, and he can only hero power out of range of the opposing hero power.
Does he have a Tar Creeper into his deck?
He doesn't. He has the Gluttonous Ooze and the Ancient of War, so he can't pick up one of those.
He's got Feral Rage, and that could also help keep him alive.
But if he nourishes and finds Feral Rage, he can gain 8, but it prevents him from clearing 2 more of these minions.
So Feral Rage, Innervate, Wrath. And he's this very specific combo. And Ant's already breathing deep because he knows that he's very close. Oh, Earthen Scales?
Earthen Scales and Wrath, okay.
Okay.
Wrath 1 of these down. Earthen Scales is in a weird spot because he can either gain more life or actually put his Jade Spirit in a position to remove a minion.
Which kind of do the same thing.
They're
both
effective.
ways.
Yeah, they're very, very similar in terms of ultimately what they do. One thing that you do end up in a position to do is...
Oh no, I think he just realized that he gave his opponent the opportunity anyways, and Ant is gonna have Savage Order to clean up the game. That is gonna be a Game 5 victory for Ant as he ends day 1 at a 5-1 score.
I mean, that was a crazy game. It looked like the turn 1 Fandor was just going to carry Ray to victory, but Ant found the Innervate Power of the Wild to go with his turn 5 living mana, and that explosive turn just carried him to victory.
Absolutely, and rayC, you can see the devastation as he realized he was 1 step away from being really close. But the consolation is that Ant has a really good score. So one of his tiebreakers, at least, is based off of how well his opponents do in the field, and Ant's doing pretty good.
Yeah, and there will be players with 2 losses who do make it into the top 8. Getting your second loss, especially in the later rounds, is generally much better for your position in those tiebreaker situations.
Absolutely. So rayC fans, definitely hold your head up. But Ant has definitely proven himself, not only, of course, in his activity in the community as a Meta Snapshot contributor, but also based off of his results. As you can see, the relief over his head. And that wraps up our coverage over the beginning rounds of round number 6. There are some other games happening, and Core and Firebet we're also paying pretty close attention, so we go